Good afternoon, everybody. I think we're now ready to start the DDRC meeting. Welcome, members, staff, and guests. We ask for your patience during this meeting. Multiple staff members are behind the scenes to make sure that the meeting runs smoothly and all participants and citizens are able to communicate with the commission at the appropriate times. If you are watching virtually, you may see images of anyone present at the meeting. However, images of anyone participating virtually will not be visible. In addition to watching the meeting virtually, the public will be able to participate via these methods.
You can participate via email, phone, logging into the web session, or participating in person. When participating, please provide your name for documentation purposes. If you're watching, you can stream the meetings through City TV, accessed at www.youtube.com/user/Columbia-SC-Government. If you're emailing, you can submit letters and statements to cocboardmeeting@columbiasc.gov leading up to and/or during the meeting, as this account will be monitored during the proceedings. Emails or letters sent during the meeting will be read into the record. Emails or letters received prior to the meeting have been forwarded to the commission. If you're phoning in, you can call 855-925-2801. When prompted, please enter the meeting code 4020. Those participating by phone will receive 3 options on how to participate. Star 1 will allow you to listen. Star 2 will allow you to record a voicemail message that will be read into the record. Star 3 will allow a participant to be placed in a queue so they may speak live when prompted. Please make sure your computer audio is muted if calling in live via your phone. You can stream via the web at publicinput.com/COC-DDRC-AUG 2021. If you're here in person and you want to speak about a case today, you must speak up when the chairperson calls for public comment. I'll call the roll.
Amy, and before you do, I'll just note, since this is our kind of first in-person/hybrid public meeting, so just remind all commissioners when you speak with the mask on to be loud, clear, and slow. Thank you.
That's right, and just remember too, you have to push your button on your mic in order for it to work. It looks like it's lit until you actually push it, and then you realize the brighter light indicates it's lit. So just in case that's helpful.
I'm going to call the roll members.
Mr. Baker?
Present.
Ms. Branham?
Present.
Mr. Broom?
Present.
Ms. Jaco?
Present.
Ms. Johnson?
Present.
Mr. Wolf?
Present.
We have quorum.
In order to avoid ex parte communications, DDRC members are under strict instructions not to discuss cases under consideration with the public or with each other outside of the public forum. The meeting typically starts with staff calling the case, giving a summary of the project, and then calling on the applicant to present if they wish. Decisions are typically made in one evening. Decisions may be appealed within 30 days to a court of competent jurisdiction. Oaths will be administered individually, as we hear either from applicants or from live speakers. Applicants with requests before the DDRC are allotted a presentation time of 10 minutes. This time should include, but is not limited to, an overview of the project, case history, and any pertinent meetings held regarding the request. This time also includes all persons presenting information on behalf of the applicant, such as attorneys, engineers, and architects. This time limit does not include any questions asked by the DDRC or staff regarding request. Members of the general public are given the opportunity to address their concerns in intervals of 2 minutes. Applicants may have 5 minutes to respond. Staff has a timer and will make presenters aware of when their time has expired. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are not.
The DDRC uses the consent agenda to approve non-controversial or routine matters by a single motion and vote. If a member of the DDRC or the general public wants to discuss an item on the consent agenda, they must speak up immediately after the consent agenda is read and ask that a project be removed from the agenda and considered as part of the regular agenda during the meeting. The DDRC then approves the remaining consent agenda items. Will staff please read the consent agenda?
Certainly. The first item on the consent agenda is 1731 Hayward Street, a request for design approval for an addition in the Wales Garden Architectural Conservation District. The next case is 3101 Amherst Avenue, a request for design approval for exterior changes and an addition, as well as for preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill. This is in the Oakwood Court Architectural Conservation District. The final case on the consent agenda is 1225 to 1229 Lincoln Street. It's a request for design approval for exterior changes and for preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill. This is in the West Gervais Historic Commercial District.
Is there anyone from the DDRC that would like any item removed from the consent agenda? Is there anyone from the public, either here today in person or who's participating virtually, that would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda? When participating, please provide your name for the minutes. Please communicate by sending an email to cocboardmeeting@columbiasc.gov, or please communicate via phone by pressing *2 to leave a voicemail or *3 to speak in person. We'll pause a moment to allow any communication from the public.
We don't currently have any emails regarding the consent agenda.
We checking on the
Madam
phone?
Chair, we're just waiting. Sometimes there's a little lag time,
Sure.
so we're waiting to allow for any comment. We've received no communication from the public.
Okay. Do I have a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda and also the July minutes?
So moved. Or do I need to repeat it again?
Second. So we had a motion and a second.
Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Ms. Branham?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller-Wilt?
Yes.
Ms. Jaco?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson? Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
And Mr. Baker?
Yes.
The motion passes.
So we now move on to the regular agenda. Staff can present the first case.
Sure. So the first case on the regular agenda is 2222 Main Street. This is a request for certificate of design approval for new construction in the North Main Corridor overlay. This proposal is for a mixed-use development on the site of the former Jim Moore Cadillac dealership between Main and Sumter Streets and between Franklin and Scott Streets. The development proposes 248 residential units and a few live-work units. The development utilizes primarily structured parking with some surface parking. The The project was before the commission for an informational presentation in May. The commission generally commended the site plan with a few suggestions about addressing the visibility of the parking garage from North Main Street. Architecturally, the commission recommended a simplified materials palette with a more commercial appearance along the primary corridors, emphasizing the importance of the percentage of fenestration as well as the depth of openings to provide articulation to the facades. Staff comments reference the design guidelines for the North Main Corridor Design District within your packets. The building is primarily sited appropriately, addressing the street frontages with narrow setbacks and placing surface parking to the interior of the parcel and/or screened from the right-of-way. The one exception, which is a change from the informational presentation, is the garage frontage on Sumter Street. Previously, there were residential units along the Sumter Street side of the parking garage, providing active frontage along the sidewalk. Due to some grade challenges, the units have been moved to the west rear side of the garage, leaving the garage frontage exposed along the sidewalk. While landscaping is proposed to soften and screen the facade, it is far less effective than addressing the public realm with residential units, particularly on this neighborhood-facing frontage. The building provides straightforward commercial space with large storefront windows that would easily accommodate various uses over time. The applicant has responded to the comments at the May meeting effectively by providing additional brick on the facades, increasing their percentage of openings, and scaling back some of the more stylized details to respond to the simpler context of the North Main corridor. The building floor plan utilizes recesses and projections to effectively break up the long street frontage into architectural bays. Balconies and stoops are used successfully to break up the massing of the facade and add articulation and activation to the street within each floor of each bay, rather than stepping down the brick at the recess as proposed. While the Sumter and Franklin intersection had previously shown a restaurant space, this has been modified to live workspace for logistical reasons. The live workspace provides storefront opportunities that will provide a nice transition from commercial to residential along this part of Sumter Street. The residential frontages along the street have stoops and direct access to the sidewalk as recommended. The brick is brought up to the second floor to emphasize the corners of the buildings. The Scott Street elevation will need to be reviewed. The staff recommendation is for deferral of the request primarily to address the Sumter Street garage frontage. As well, staff recommends addressing the following prior to approval: that the brick be expanded on the Main Street facade bays as recommended in the staff markup, a complete elevation for Scott Street be provided, fenestration calculations for street-facing elevations be provided, window details and sections and material details and cut sheets be provided, roof-mounted utility equipment screening be provided if applicable, more information about Main Street entrances be provided, and retaining wall sections be provided to better understand how the grade change will affect the pedestrian realm. And just for reference, this is a site plan from the May informational presentation. For those of you who may not have been here for that, this just shows the site plan with the units along the Sumter Street frontage of the parking garage. And then this is just a quick diagram where staff is recommending the additional brick on the Main Street facade, and also just where it turns the corner onto the parking lot on the north elevation. And the applicant is present and actually brought some diagrams or an additional rendering.
Are you ready for the applicant to come up?
That's the conclusion of the staff presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon. If you, when you get settled, if you could please state your name,
Yes, my name is Stephen Middleton.
and do you swear to tell the truth in these proceedings?
I do.
And Mr. Middleton, if you want to tell me which slides to reference as you're speaking, just let me know if you want the plan or the elevations, et cetera.
I don't want any slides to distract from my engaging presentation. I think we'll be okay, thank you. I'm Steve Middleton. I am the president of Commonwealth Properties. Commonwealth Properties is a developer of this project. We're no strangers to the Columbia area. We're located in Richmond, but we developed 4 other projects in Columbia. In the city of Columbia, we've developed Vista Commons back about 20 years ago, which we still own. It's down on Gervais Street. It still, I think, gets some of the highest rents in that part of town. We recently spent about $3.5 million renovating the interiors, and we're working on the clubhouse. So I would encourage any of you to go by and take a look at it in about a month once the clubhouse is finished, if you're interested. We are a development company and also an acquisition company, but we primarily, is this on? Can you hear me? We primarily develop luxury multifamily projects throughout the southeast, so that's what we specialize in. This project, as Lucinda said, is of 250 luxury apartment units. I'll reiterate, as I said earlier during the informational presentation, that this is not a student housing project. We specifically designed our leasing criteria, both here and down at Vista Commons, to exclude undergraduate students. We would embrace any graduate students that want to come, but our typical demographic mix for our residents is anywhere from recent graduates to graduate students if we're near a university, young professionals, older professionals, divorced folks, empty nesters, retirees. So it's really the whole gambit of folks that you might find who are, I guess, now known as renters by choice. We would expect this project, I think, to be one of the nicest, if not the nicest one in the Columbia area, and get rents, I hope, knock on wood, that would reflect that. We started work on the project about a year ago and spent the first several months just trying to understand what the development hurdles might be. And they are numerous on this site, which is something that we've embraced. We spent quite a bit of time working through a variety of site plans and different building designs until we came up with what we would call a preliminary vision concept. We then set out to meet with the folks at Cottontown, Elmwood Park, and the Downtown Coalition. So we sent those plans out to them, had Zoom meetings or in-person meetings, either with the neighborhood, whoever was interested in tuning in, or the neighborhood representatives. And I think those meetings went generally well. I will note gladly the lack of protest signs behind me. We then took that information and gave an informal presentation to y'all, I think it was a couple months ago. Distilled all that feedback that we got and attempted to refine our design to address those questions and comments. And they really kind of, at that point in time, I think it came down to 3 main issues. One was traffic, one was parking, and the third was just the architectural style of the buildings. So I think the architectural style has changed. It's still kind of in keeping with the craftsman style of the surrounding historic neighborhoods to the extent that this 3-story building can be. We've increased the, I guess, fenestration storefront look on the corners there, particularly at Franklin and Sumter, to give it more of a commercial feel there. And in fact, those units along, right there, along that face Franklin are what we call live-work units. So they can serve either a commercial function or a residential function or a combination of the two, where someone might have a real estate office up front and live in the back. So they're sort of a residential commercial flex space, if you will. We also commissioned a traffic and parking study. We got that back probably a month ago, gave it to South Carolina DOT and to the city traffic engineer. From a parking standpoint, it showed that our parking, which meets the current zoning guidelines and exceeds the new zoning ordinance guidelines, exceeds what we need according to the Urban Land Institute and the parking study by about 20%. So, and based upon our experience, it's more than adequate for what we would believe the parking needs to be of our residents. Last thing we want to do is to build apartments where people, can't park their vehicle because they will not be long-term residents. From a traffic standpoint, we got comments back from the DOT who objected to our 2 entrances onto Main Street. So we had to change that to 1 entrance, which wiped out a little bit of parking, caused us to redesign some of the parking up front, and also requested that we repave and restripe the 2 northbound lanes of Main Street from Elmwood to River in order to get access to Main Street. So we're still talking to DOT about that requirement, but I suspect they'll win. So then we, I think our current efforts really addressed most of the feedback that we got from the neighborhood and what little we got back from y'all from our informational presentation, which is understandable, and some of the concerns that we got back from the city during our meetings with them. I'd be happy to kind of walk through the staff recommendations and address those. We had a little bit of a misunderstanding on my part relative to what was necessary to make a complete submission. So we were a little tardy in getting all of this information in. But with respect to brick being expanded on the Main Street facade, we have now, as of today, done that and submitted that to the staff. That's not an issue for us to do that. I think we have now provided a complete elevation for Scott Street. It is similar to the other elevations. Fenestration calculations for the street-facing elevations, I believe, are being done if they have not already been done, as have window details and sections. Roof-mounted utility equipment, all of our HVAC units will be located on the roof. They're located in the middle of the building and will be invisible from street level. So they'll be hidden either by parapets or just by virtue of their location in the middle of the buildings. We typically locate those over top of the corridor that runs down the middle of the building so that the top floor unit doesn't have HVAC units buzzing away over top of them. More information about Main Street entrances. I think what staff is referring to there is entrances into the leasing office and the co-working space, the bike shop, and the pet spa along Main Street. We would provide a main entrance into the leasing office right at the corner of the building there next to the surface parking. And then we would have 2 or 3 other entrances along Main Street from the sidewalk into those buildings to those spaces, although they are not commercial spaces that are generally open to the public. So most of the use of those spaces would be from folks who live there in the project. I will say too, I'll back up a little bit. I skipped over maybe in my rush to describe more of the amenity package. So along Main Street there, we have a leasing office and a co-working space. We've started including a co-working space into our amenity package where folks from the project, it's like a gather or a WeWork space, can come in this sort of a communal area. They can meet with folks from the outside as a conference room, a coffee bar, that sort of thing. There is about a 3,000 square foot fitness center that we spend about $120,000 on fitness equipment on, so it's quite well decked out. We have a pet spa for people who want to groom their pets. We have a bike shop, a bike repair shop area that has bike storage as well as an area to repair bicycles. Then up on the top floor, we have a rooftop club room that's about 1,500 square feet with a similarly sized rooftop deck that would look over top the pool courtyard as well as have views of the downtown central business district. The courtyard on the right side of the screen is the pool courtyard. We call it the active courtyard. It has a swimming pool, which also features a heated swim-in place spa area. We have an outdoor kitchen area there. We have cabanas, an in-water lounge area, lounge chairs, sun deck, hammocks. And then on the left-hand side is what we call the chill courtyard, which would feature an outdoor yoga exercise area, maybe a putting green, bocce ball, cornhole, some grills, generally a little more relaxed and quieter area there for our residents. The one area that I think we have difficulty accommodating staff's requests is probably the one that they're most concerned about, is the location of the parking garage there along Sumter. And you can see in this site plan, the big rectangular box in the middle, which is the parking deck, and going towards Main Street, towards the bottom of the screen, are units that line the parking deck. Those used to be on the top side, lining Sumter. There's about a 16-foot grade change from one end of that parking deck to the other. There's about a 30-foot grade change from the southwest corner at Scott and Main Street to the northeast corner at Sumter and Franklin. So there's quite a bit of topo there to deal with, and we're forced, because of the street grades there, to deal with that 16 feet as it sits on Sumter. We can internally manipulate the grades, but along the street there we're unable to. So to the extent we have units that face Sumter, they also have to meet handicap accessibility requirements, and that grade exceeds what we can do internally in the building to meet the handicap accessibility. So that's the primary reason, not the only, but the primary reason why we flopped those units over to the south side of the garage, where we can, the bottom side of the garage, where we can actually deal with the grades there on site. The package that you have, that you saw, was embarrassingly just sort of the naked end of the garage. And we fully intended and intend to do more with that, to make it a little more presentable. There it is, and pedestrian friendly. So our idea is to create a linear park along that face of the garage that would have a series of little pocket parks that would capture people walking up and down Sumter there. We would brick the bottom part of it, put some landscaping, benches, sidewalks, paver areas along there to invite folks to use that area as a spot to relax and enjoy the street level interaction on Sumter Street there. If you have the little handout, maybe, the single sheet of paper handout there, I think is a better representation of what we are attempting to do there. We're trying to dress up what is a garage and make it look a little more like a building, but certainly not offensive as a parking garage might be. And invite folks in 2 or 3 areas or 3 or 4 areas to use that space to relax, as I said. As my architect said, if we have to move the garage, it's like throwing a hand grenade into the site plan and the project at this point. And I don't say that as an excuse, but we have been working on it for quite some time, and we have gotten quite a bit of feedback from the neighborhoods and the staff that we've attempted to incorporate. So it's not something I would relish, is restarting or starting over on at this point in time. So I'm out. That's all the talking I got.
Madam Chair, could I make a comment?
Yes, I was going to ask too, just if staff had any comment for
Oh,
us
good.
before we start, but for some of the information that was provided since materials were received. I know he kind of was going through this bulleted list of things that had either been provided since then, so can you give us some feedback on that?
I mean, the only thing, I guess, that I would say is that typically, most of the bulleted items on the recommendations would be fine with deferring to staff, but since there was the big issue about the units on Sumter Street, that was the primary reason for the recommend to defer. So the other things could be handled by staff, but that one issue was something that was considered significant enough to warrant the recommendation to defer.
I mean, for our part, we're certainly comfortable working with staff to get the first 6 or 7 issues resolved. I think and what happens along the face of the parking deck, I'd be happy to work with staff as well. Moving the parking deck is, I'm not drawing a line in the sand or anything, don't misunderstand me, but that's a much bigger deal.
Okay, now I'm going to open it up to DDRC commissioners.
So first of all, thank you so much for your hard work in meeting some of the original comments that you got. I was not part of that, but I think, obviously, I can see that you've put a lot of work into it. I think the part that's missing a bit for me, and not that I don't trust staff to handle it, is there's not a lot of definition, at least in what I have, about what the materials are. There's not a lot of, there's nothing called out about what these materials are. I understand that the previous submission was a little more detailed, a little more complicated, and that y'all simplified that, which I think is good. But I think that we definitely need a little bit more detail. I think context is particularly important when submitting this type of information. So the site plan is not even shown like on the aerial to know what the impact of the garage, for instance, is on the areas across the street. So I did some of that research myself, and I've walked up and down Sumter and along those wonderful new things that we have along Sumter. But I think it's real important that it's not just about how this garage looks, but how it impacts that pedestrian experience. And thank you so much for bringing this new rendering, because that helps a lot in terms of some of the comments that I was going to make about having no articulation whatsoever, and that looks like you're providing some of that. But again, I think it goes back to, and I appreciate that moving it at this juncture and understanding parking garages and understanding the grade change. I understand it has to go somewhere, and it's better that it's behind Main Street instead of on Main Street. But I do think more thorough investigation needs to be done about how do these pocket parks, I appreciate that you've got these pocket parks. I'm just not sure that I see enough of information about the materials and the context to make me as comfortable, but that's not to say that staff couldn't work with you on those, but I think the submission is lacking in terms of the information provided to the DDRC is what I would.
So in terms of building materials, if we're talking specifically about those would be brick, as well as hardy, some sort of cementitious hardy, typically known as hardy plank, hardy panel. We usually sometimes mix the two, a hardy panel with board and batten strips and the hardy plank, but it otherwise would be masonry. So there's no vinyl on there. There's, it's a project that we
And no
built
stucco and.
to be low maintenance. We do use vinyl windows, so I can't say there's no vinyl, but there's no vinyl siding or no aluminum wrapped trim or anything like that.
I guess what I'm saying is that, and I appreciate some more comment on that. I just feel like maybe there needs to be more information about the context of this garage and the new detailing that you've put into it, and the materials on the garage facade, as it also pertains to the materials on the building facade.
Yeah, the garage facade, just so you know, I'm happy to provide more detail, but while we're talking about it, is we would use thin brick on that, so it's, the stuff that kind of, I don't want to say glues, but, mortar to the side of the precast garage concrete that's there, and then the white elements, the white columns that you see there would be similar limestone precast material, so it looks very much like limestone and brick there.
Right.
The plan of the parking garage, you have shown elevators
each corner, is that correct?
That's right. Yes, sir.
I don't see any positions for elevators likewise for the units themselves. Are you planning to put elevators in those too?
Well, they're three-story buildings, and typically in three-story buildings, you would not do that. But these elevators service those buildings. So most of the times, you know, you would drive in, if you lived on the third floor, you would park on the third floor, walk over, and, you know, go right into the hallway, direct access from the garage into the building on the third floor.
From the parking garage?
From the parking garage, right. So the parking
So I
garage
can-
is
I
connected.
can load appliances from the parking garage into the units.
Pardon?
I can unload appliances from the parking garage into the top floor of the units.
Appliances, I mean,
Refrigerators,
right, I
washer
mean,
and
our
dryer.
maintenance, we own the appliances, so if somebody needed a new refrigerator, our maintenance guy would supply that. But yes, the easy way for him to do it would be to pull into the garage, take the refrigerator, put it on the elevator, go up to the third floor, second floor, go directly from the garage into the building, wheel it down the hall and into the unit. Yeah. Or if you were bringing your groceries in, which would be
Yeah.
a more usual thing, you know, you could park on the second floor, get on the elevator, go up to your unit on the fourth floor, whatever floor it is, walk directly into the building at that level. So,
One other thing is trash collection. How's that going to work?
we have one main trash collection area. We hire a group called trash valets, different places, and called different names in different places. But you would take your trash, it's in a special trash can that they deliver, put it outside your door at 8 o'clock at night. They come by in the middle of the night, pick it up, take it to the trash collection room, stick it in the thing, it drops down into the compactor that's down on the bottom floor. The compactor packs it, and then 2 or 3 times a week, the maintenance guy rolls the compactor out of the building to the trash pickup area. The trash truck comes, takes it, and dumps it, and puts it back. So you don't have to ever use the trash room, but you can use the trash room if you want to. And it is basically located right at the corner of the garage, would be the southwest corner of the garage there. Did you understand did I do an adequate explanation of
It
that?
seems like it's going to work.
The trash rooms stack on top of each other. So there's a trash room on each floor, and you would just walk to that trash room, open the hatch, throw your trash in.
I'm
drop
very
down,
familiar with
shoot
that,
to the-
yes.
to the bottom, yeah.
One last thing. On your elevation, you show steps coming off the units. You got separate, and you got a little gap between the two, the front steps. Right there.
Mhm.
I'm not in favor of that idea, with that gap between the two. It looks like it's just going to collect trash, unless you have a shrubbery growing in there. I don't see how that's going to work. It's a minor thing, but that's something that needs to be addressed.
You would want them to be connected there?
Well, I'm not suggesting what to do. I'm just saying that it looks awkward. It looks like you got too much going on there.
We've got that sort of structural column in the middle there, so I'm thinking what the architect was attempting to do is to keep people from, if they were one big wide stoop, walking up and slamming into that because they're looking at their feet. I'd be afraid if we planted a bush in there, a shrub in there, that it wouldn't grow just because it's kind of wedged in there. So we could perhaps separate the stairs a little further. And that's 2 sets of stairs because one goes to the unit on the right-hand side and one goes to the unit on the left-hand side there. And, in the past, we have separated those 2 units with a railing sometimes so that everybody has their own little private front porch there. So the railing could tie into that, but,
Yeah, that's another thing, you're missing railings.
yeah. So we could certainly spread those farther apart. That would be, they might not line up with the doors. I'm not sure they line up with the doors right now, but we can look at that, by all means.
And one last thing, I noticed on the site plan, you got under, this area right here is occupied, and then in the corner here is occupied. Is there going to be a future development, phase 2?
I don't know those. So I can't-
Somebody
I
asked
can't
that
speak for-
question, and I didn't know the answer.
I can't speak for those folks, so it's not part of our plan. There is a grassed lot, 2314, where there's a rectangle there that we have attempted to buy but have been unsuccessful, that we designated as a future commercial spot, maybe for a little wine and cheese or bodega or some sort of little commercial area. But so far, we've been unsuccessful in acquiring that. I have met with 2 of the other property owners just to discuss what we were doing. They were delighted that something was going to happen there. So,
Okay, just asking. Thank you.
Any other commissioners have any comments?
I just have a quick question for staff in light of the new rendering that we've just received. And now that we've kind of had an opportunity to hear you kind of talk about the project, you expressed concerns with ADA compliance if the residential units were facing Sumter Street. So I'm curious, in light of that kind of development, because I didn't recognize that as one of the potential issues for the staff, you recommended deferral to address the parking garage facade. Short of moving the residential units back to where they were originally, is there another alternative that y'all have discussed at this juncture? Because I'm just curious what that would be, because these are kind of two extremes. Is there something in the middle that would permit the garage to stay where it is, but kind of fall within the design guidelines at the same time?
Are you asking staff?
Yes.
The alternative?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I guess, certainly there are probably a number of alternatives. I think that having, certainly screening along a blank parking garage frontage is sort of, the last resort, right, for a blank wall along the street edge. That's better than not having the screening. Having units is ideal. So I think if there are any alternatives in between there, that would certainly be for the applicant to propose to the DDRC. If there is a way to get some units or a unit, or, I don't know. That's definitely not something that we're going to recommend how they solve, but I think there's just still concerns that that's just a long stretch of no active frontage. So maybe there is another solution between the two that have been presented.
If it wasn't, it's just on such a steep grade, one of the things we thought about was to use that area as sort of a food truck area where people, we could have a little event, pull in the food truck there and people could gather and, but it's just not a comfortable grade to park and have a facility at. So,
I have a comment. Can y'all hear me all right? I don't have a button on here.
Yes.
Just more of a comment, not necessarily a design comment or anything like that, but just from a market knowledge standpoint, the live-work units, I'd probably like to see more just kind of like traditional retail. Live-work in the city of Columbia just hasn't been extremely successful. There are there are very few examples, but the few examples have not done tremendously well here. But I know what you're trying to accomplish there. You're moving the units that were originally designed with the parking garage is now facing Sumter, and just trading them off over there, but just something to consider. But then maybe from also an aesthetic standpoint on the garage, just consider some sort of a living wall, like a big vine or something like that, that's at a height that's manageable, that may block some of the brick, but, could give a a different appearance than just a parking garage.
Any other commissioners, any other comments? I mean, I just want to say, I think this is a very exciting project. I think, for me, I think we've got some information lacking just to have confidence of how things are going to move forward. That, that's probably a little bit of my concern. But does anybody else have any other follow-up or questions at this point? Okay. We encourage those that would like to communicate via email to begin sending in letters and emails. You may email cocboardmeeting@columbiasc.gov or go on the web at publicinput.com/cocddrc-AUG2021. For those wanting to leave a voicemail or speak live, call 855-925-2801. When prompted, please enter the meeting code 4020, then press star 2 to begin leaving a voicemail. If you would like to speak live, press star 3. We will now hear any comments from anyone who is here in person. We have one.
Good afternoon.
Hello, please state your name.
John Shearer, Director of Cultural Resources for Historic Columbia. I
And
realize...
let me just add, do you swear to tell the truth in
I
this
swear to
proceeding?
tell the whole
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely, just like always. Mr. Middleton, thank you for your, and we applaud Historic Columbia, we applaud the investment in Main Street and in Columbia. And I realize today that probably the best thing that I can offer is probably an epitaph for a building that actually has kind of a remarkable history in Columbia's evolution. Incidentally, during the pandemic, Historic Columbia is responsible for about 6 months worth of work, research on this site in preparation for National Register nomination that would have or could have yielded significant tax credits, which would have pushed both historic preservation as well as informed new development. So what I offer you today really is probably an epitaph for a property that, for most of you, is the Jim Moore Cadillac Olds dealership. But what it really was the brainchild of Charles C. Vogel, who was one of Columbia's pioneer automobile dealers and a moving force in the capital city in the post-World War II period. He had had plenty of experience prior to service in World War II, but it was after World War II that he came back to Columbia and chose to invest in this section of Main Street. He located 2222 Main Street, his company called Mutual Motors. If you go back on the Sumter Street side today and you look where it says Jim Moore, all of those letters once spelled Mutual Motors. Jim Moore was very frugal in that when he redid that. You can actually see where it said Mutual Motors. This building is a hybrid Depression modern, mid-century modern masonry structure consisting of a 1949 parts and service garage and a 1951 plate glass and aluminum frame showroom and company office. It's about 40,000 square feet. The preeminent architectural firm of Lafay and Fair designed it. Stands on about a 5-acre property, as you know. This section of Main Street during the mid-1940s through 1970s evolved from essentially a residential neighborhood into a mixed-use commercial corridor, dominated by automobile sales and service-related industries. The structure is among the largest dealerships of its time in South Carolina state capital. Mutual Motors embodied post-World War II era Columbians' interests in the mainstays of atomic age modernity, privately owned transportation, and streamlined commercial architectural designs incorporating contemporary building materials, and including, of course, large expanses of plate glass, plastiblock, and sheet metal. I won't go on into any more details other than to say that we were on the cusp of something that I felt was going to be a remarkable opportunity for redevelopment of this property through the harnessing of potential tax credits, Bailey Bill, and so forth. And we have been working with the State Historic Preservation Office in this endeavor. So, I offer you, I suppose, what it could have been. And I wish that Historic Columbia could have been part of this conversation when it was going on. We are obviously very excited about revitalizing our city in all aspects. But we just weren't part of that conversation. And so anytime we can be, we would like to be. And incidentally, the Vista Commons received an Historic Preservation Award from Historic Columbia many, many moons ago. And that's been a really important chapter in revitalizing that part of Columbia as well. So I don't really have much more to say. I don't think there is much more to say. The design is something that's impressive. You put a lot of work into it. But I just wanted to make sure that the record indicated what we are losing in the process. So, thank you very much for your time.
Not sure if there's any follow-up to that. Is there any other public who wishes to speak? Who has signed it? Any comments received in writing?
At this time, we have one email, and I'll go ahead and read that now. It says, "Good afternoon. Question. Are these apartments going to be more for normal working people like myself or students? We have way too many apartments that we as working adults cannot access. Will these apartments be reasonably priced or Section 8 housing or similar housing programs such as that? I ask this because Columbia has become a city just catering to college students and apartments so outrageous in price and constant rent increases. You either have a nice place to live but can't afford it, or a slum apartment with needles on the ground. Thank you, Wanda M. Shearer." And that is the only comment we have in writing at this time.
Okay. Any voicemails received? No?
We do not have any
Okay.
voicemails.
Give me a refresher, staff. Do we give anybody a chance to comment on what's been received, or where are we at? Oh, here we go. Thank you.
Sorry.
Right on cue. The applicant can have 5 minutes if you'd like to respond to any of the comments, which would be, I think, the email received, if you so desire.
Well, I guess with respect to the historic nature of the Jim Moore Cadillac building, we did look at attempting to incorporate that into the design when we first got started on this. And it's situated right in the middle of the site, so it's just very difficult to work with in terms of incorporating it into the overall project. Obviously, if we could have, we'd love to take advantage of the tax credits that are available for that. But we were unable to figure out a way to do that. With respect to Section 8 housing, that's not what we're about. There's a place for that, there's a need for that, that's not what we do. Likewise with student housing, there's a place for that and a need for that, but that's not what we do. That's a special design, a special niche of the multifamily market, and we would not, as I said earlier, we would not reach out to students and specifically design our leasing criteria to try to exclude them to the extent we can in accordance with fair housing.
Thank you. Any?
Thank you.
Any follow-up questions from any of the commissioners? All right, at this point, I'll open the floor up for a motion.
I'm sorry, was someone else speaking? Okay. All right, so based upon the testimony provided, the email comments from the community, the exhibits presented today, I move to defer the provision of a certificate of design approval for new construction to allow for further consideration of the following design elements. And I recognize that some of this was conceded to earlier, but just for the sake of completeness, the items to be addressed during this deferral would include the brick expansion on the Main Street facade, the consideration and analysis of a complete elevation for Scott Street, which was provided, an evaluation of the fenestration calculations for street-facing elevations, consideration of the window details and sections, materials, and cut sheets, which will be provided, the roof-mounted utility equipment to be provided, as well as the consideration of more information regarding the Main Street entrances, as well as information pertaining to the retaining wall sections to be provided. And this also takes into consideration the guidelines for the North Main Corridor Design District.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
And did everybody clearly hear the motion? I just moved forward, but staff, did y'all clearly hear that? It was pretty much a motion to just defer until all these items were addressed.
With listing all the staff
Yes,
recommendations.
yes, and I
Correct.
think Commissioner Johnson tried to note when some items had been provided and what was still waiting for receipt, if that helps.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so we have a motion and a second.
Sorry, quick question. Do we need to also mention the bolded primarily to address the Sumter Street garage facade as one of the bulleted items? If we want.
And, okay, and I
Was that
apologize. I think
part of the
I did-
motion? I couldn't hear the first part.
I think I did skip that, so let me slightly amend the motion to also consider addressing the Sumter Street garage facade as well. Is that sufficient?
Just restating to make sure all the points here have been included, so.
Mr. Brim, do you still second the amended motion? Okay, all right. Mr. Broom,
Yes.
Ms. Branham,
Yes.
Ms. Fuller-Wilt,
Yes.
Ms. Jaco,
Yes,
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Wolf,
Yes.
and Mr. Baker.
Yes.
The motion passes.
okay. Moving on to the next case, please.
This is 1808 Catawba Street. It's a request for a certificate of design approval for exterior changes and for preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill within the Wales Garden Architectural Conservation District. The applicant came before the DDRC in August 2020 with a number of proposed changes to the house, including alterations to the side additions, the addition of a second driveway and carport at the left side of the house, the removal of a non-original bay on the front of the house, and painting the non-original brick veneer. The requests were approved by DDRC, and work related to that initial application has since begun. The current application is for wholesale window replacement and replacement of the front door and surround. The applicant has also submitted an application for the Bailey Bill. Most of the scope proposed for the property, as listed on the Bailey Bill application, is in keeping with district and Bailey Bill guidelines. However, the request to replace all windows and the door surround is not in keeping with either the district or Bailey Bill standards. Looking a little bit at the history of the house itself, 1808 Catawba Street is one of the earliest homes built within the neighborhood with a 1916 construction date. It was designed by J. Carroll Johnson during his partnership with Urquhart. They had the firm of Urquhart and Johnson. Both architects were prominent local architects in their own right, and together designed a number of buildings throughout South Carolina, including the number of school buildings. J. Carroll Johnson himself became the University of South Carolina's resident architect in 1944, and was also responsible for the design of many buildings on that campus from the 1920s into the 1950s. Johnson was also known for his residential architecture, designing over 120 houses during his career. And based on research done by Historic Columbia, we can confirm that at least 6 houses were designed within Wales Garden that were either done by J. Carroll Johnson himself or with partnership with Urquhart. This particular house has similarities with other Johnson design homes, such as the form, towering chimneys, use of 6/1 windows, the door surround details, and classically detailed covered entry. Intact historic features include windows, chimneys, front door surround, covered entry, the front dormer. The overall historic form is also discernible. And the brick veneer was added likely in the 1940s. And interestingly, the wood siding that was the original cladding on the house is still intact beneath that veneer. Looking at precedent for allowing for wholesale window replacement, staff researched files for requests for wholesale window replacement in Wales Garden and found no cases where it was allowed for contributing structure. There are 2 instances that staff found where a wholesale replacement of historic windows was requested. One was at 144 Saluda, which was denied by the DDRC. Another was at 203 Saluda, where wholesale replacement was denied, but specific windows were allowed for replacement, where they were found to be non-original or minimally visible. Also want to note that highly deteriorated or non-repairable windows and not original or non-historic windows are always permitted for replacement. And many of these instances are handled at staff level rather than requiring DDRC review as part of our process. Looking at the guidelines for doors, they state retain and repair historic door openings, doors, screen doors, trim and details such as transoms, side lights, pediments and hoods, where they contribute to the architectural character of the building. The current door itself appears to be a replacement. However, the surround, including the transom and side lights, are original and contribute to the architectural character of the house. The side lights and transom include diamond-patterned leaded glass tracery, which can be found in other Johnson-designed homes, as well as other colonial revival-style homes within this district. While some glass and lead cane does need repair, staff has found that the surround is in repairable condition and per the guidelines should be retained and repaired. Looking at windows, the guidelines state when technically and economically feasible, repair of deteriorated or damaged windows shall be preferred over replacement, as well as if wholesale replacement is found to be necessary, either match the original unit or substitute a unit appropriate to the period of significance for the home. Staff has found, based on their evaluation, that all windows are in repairable condition, and thus replacement is not found to be necessary. While the windows likely need repairs to make them operable, the windows staff evaluated were intact, without rot, and with weights still in place. Staff didn't note any deterioration that would require replacement, but is always happy to reevaluate if deterioration is found over the course of renovations. As stated in the principles for windows, windows are a significant character-defining feature of any structure. Original windows were constructed so that individual components could be repaired, instead of requiring wholesale replacement if one piece rots or breaks. Included in your packets, staff provided photos of repaired historic windows that were in fairly poor condition, much worse than seen in this home. That shows that repair of historic windows is possible and can be done to a high level. Looking at the Bailey Bill standards, Standard 4 states distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property should be preserved. The windows and door surround are distinctive historic features that are in keeping with the character, architectural style of the house, and consistent with features found in other Johnson-designed homes. Removal of these features is not in keeping with this standard. Standard 5 also states that deteriorated historic features shall be repaired rather than replaced, and where severity of deterioration requires replacement, the new should match the old. As previously noted, staff has not seen any deterioration in the windows or the door surround that would necessitate replacement. Replacing them rather than repairing is not in keeping with this standard. The front door itself, as stated previously, is a replacement, and the door chosen to replace it should correspond in design with the side lights and surround to be architecturally appropriate. Also to note, preservation is about much more than aesthetics or how things look. It's about protecting historic character, including features and materials. These features and materials were made to be repaired, and as such last decades longer than modern materials. The windows on this house have lasted 100 years and could easily last another 100 with a little care and minor repairs. So for staff recommendation, staff finds that the request for wholesale window replacement and replacement of the front door surround is not in keeping with Section 17698 of the City Ordinance or Section 7 of the Wales Garden Architectural Conservation District Design Guidelines, and recommends denial of the request for a certificate of design approval. And related to the Bailey bill, staff finds that the project as proposed at 1808 Catawba does not comply with section 17698 of the city ordinance. Staff can only recommend granting preliminary certification for the Bailey bill if the request to replace the windows and door surround is withdrawn or denied, as listed in the following conditions. The request to replace the windows or door surround be withdrawn or denied. The replacement front door be reviewed and approved by staff prior to purchase. The project meeting or exceeding 20% investment threshold requirements. All work meeting the standards for work as outlined in 17698, and all other details deferred to staff. Any questions for staff?
I have one question.
Sure.
Is the office area off to the left of the front of the house part of the original structure as well?
It is not.
Okay, so those windows would not be under the same,
They are not, and those were already approved for replacement.
okay, great.
Good clarification. Any other commissioners, any questions for staff at this point? Okay. Is the applicant present, or someone want to speak on their behalf? Come on up. She told you couldn't come up? Please state your name.
Hey, my name is Tim Hance. I'm a local architect here in Columbia.
Okay, and do you swear to tell the truth in this
Yes, ma'am.
proceeding?
I do.
Thank you.
So, we started this project last year. Great couple moving here from Charlotte, Bakari Sellers and Ellen Sellers. And so, nice young couple, two small babies, twins. And they're just transferring here to Columbia because of their jobs, or his job. House is a great house, and I really agree with almost all of everything that Rachel has been talking about, because we've had lots of conversation back and forth and everything. When we came before, when I first started looking at the house and just kind of getting a feel for it and everything, I noticed that something was interesting about the brick on the house. The offsets were different. I couldn't figure out why at first. And after a little bit of study and thought, I think this house was veneered. It was a wood-sided house. And it was veneered at some point. And I've been doing it for 25, almost 30 years. And this is the first one I've seen in Wells Garden, Shandon, around town that's actually had a veneer put on. So I called Rachel, and we talked about it. And she said, I said, if it is that way, would we have the opportunity to paint the brick as a choice? Because that was one of the requests from the owner when they were looking at the house. And so she said, I have to get back. So she did. And she called me later, and she said, we agree. We looked at the Sanborn maps and 1916 date and what was on the house. And so, yes, we agree that the brick was added. We will let you paint it. We've never done that before, Tim, in the city of Columbia. We've not allowed that, so I would like to present it. Amy wants me to present it, so we don't get anybody confused and all the other people we've told we can't paint the brick. So I said, that's great. I don't like to cause any problems. Let's go for it. So we did. And that was our first approval back in last August, that we got approval for the, with the office on the left and the windows. We wanted to tear off the old-looking bay that somebody had added probably in the 50s or 60s that didn't go with the house. I wanted to kind of take the house back to what it kind of originally was. So we talked through that, got through all the approval process and things like that. Everybody said, okay, let's go. So contractor filed his permit. It took him a while to get everything in order and everything like that. Got the permit issued, started the renovation. And then it was like, I forgot. We got to get a Bailey bill certification. So we stopped and said, Rachel, why didn't we do that before? I don't know why we didn't do that before, but let's get that going. So we started and got the certification going. And in the meantime, Ellen asked me, she's like, Tim, if we got the approval to paint the brick, would we have an option to start the discussion with them about the windows? Because I would like to have all of the windows on my house be the same. So when people look at them, it's not a 7 old windows or 6 old windows and new ones. I said, we certainly could have the conversation, I said, let me propose it to them. We've got to go in for the recertification, the first preliminary part of the Bailey bill, and that, we'll make that a part of it. And she said, well, while we're asking for that, can we ask for the front door too? And I said, okay, we'll ask for the front door too. I said, let me think about that a minute and all. And so that's the communication that Rachel and I have had. And what's interesting about this house to me is, and I added these photos to Rachel's, what she's got up there now. So the house was a wood-sided house. At some point, somebody came to Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so and said, Rick, it's the world's greatest thing. Cover over your siding, and I guess you won't have any more maintenance or anything like that. The house originally, and the two photos are what we peel back on the back of the house. And this is where we've been doing our addition work and things like that. See, there's about a 6.5 to 7 inch band that went around the original windows. And they did something which I thought was a little clever. When you veneer a house in new construction, we offset 1.5 inches from the framing. We have an airspace gap in there. And then we put the brick on, which is about 3.5 inches. To fill that gap, we do what we call a brick mold. It's an extra piece of wood. We put it around the frame of the window. That's what they did. They came into this. If you look at the little transom window at the top there, you'll see a little rolled edge. That rolled edge is the brick mold that they added to the units to conceal the gap of where they added the brick veneer on the house. So that brought the question in my mind of, well, has the windows been modified enough? They're not original. The sash is original, but the brick mold is not original. And it's varied and it's changed from what the original intent was. Now, and architects, we look at this house and we call this a 3-bay house. The reason we call it a 3-bay house is because you have the 3 windows. So the facade is instead of being divided by 5 or 7, it's 3. That's still intact with the windows and the doors and things like that. So the question for us was, would we have an opportunity to have a conversation of whether it's feasible or not to discuss replacing the windows with new units that are insulated and things like that while we're doing what we're doing to the house. I want to back up just a second to tell you, since I've been doing this for so long, everybody probably at some point has renovated something, whether it's just painting the room or tearing down something or adding on to something. So my opinion of renovation has changed a little bit. And luckily I found a client that said, I love this. So on this house, because they have small children, we decided to take the inside all the way down to the frame. I don't know of a house that I've worked on in 25 years where we've taken the entire inside down to the entire frame. Reason for that is the owners wanted to remove all of the knob and tube wiring, all of the lead-based paint, all of the plumbing, all of the electrical system that has been patched on. And a lot of people don't realize when we renovate houses, it may not be a total renovation, it may be attached to what's there. So knob and tube wiring is still valid, then the electrician will come in and he'll update the wiring for the addition, but he connects back to it. Almost every one of these houses has an old Federal Pacific panel, almost 100% of the time. Federal Pacific went out of business because their breakers quit working. They become, what the word is, spongy. And so they went into bankruptcy. So usually you find a house with a Federal Pacific panel, 100 amp, in a closet. You can't do them in closets anymore. And then maybe there's some sort of sub-panel off of that they've upgraded it to a 200 amp service. This house had that. Plumbing on a house starts out anywhere from galvanized, which is what you see when you have reduced water pressure. It fills in with corrosion on the inside. Copper, which pits after about 30 years. CPVC was a product we used. Didn't see any polybutylene. That was a temporary product. And then, and now we use a PEX type thing. All of this stuff is being stripped out of the house, and it's being taken down to the inside to the frame. Coincidentally, the house is in great shape. Old houses of this era actually had a type of framing system called balloon framing. Today, when we construct, we use a system called platform framing. The reason they used balloon framing back then, as the 2x4 goes from the first floor all the way to the top of the second floor. It's almost 20 feet long. The reason it's done that way is because that's back when wood was drawn straighter and it's more solid, and so you could actually buy a piece of wood that would go 20 feet long and use it. Today, we do 9 foot, 10 foot, and we kind of splice it as it goes up. So I'm kind of giving you the background of this, kind of what they wanted to do to make the house safe, and just have it totally renovated on the inside. These houses don't have any insulation. If they have any at all, it's a little bit in the attic space. But you have a 4,000 square foot house with no insulation in the walls, and no insulation in the floors, and a little bit in there. We've improved dramatically on spray foam installations. And so we can take a 4,000 square foot house today, spray foam it, and come away with a $135 a month power bill. A 4,000 square foot with no insulation like this, you could easily have an $800 a month power bill. So that's money well spent. We've had good luck with ceiling crawl spaces here that helps people with allergies and things like that. You tell me if I'm talking too long.
Staff will tell us, I'm sure.
I'm good? I keep going? And so that's how invasive they are with taking this down to making it correct. And as a mom and the little kids and things like that, you know, she just wants everything, she wants the inside to be a new house, but it wants it to look old on the outside. So that was kind of the path we took to asking, do we have to have, or because of the addition of the veneering, and because of the addition of the brick molding, which is not original to the house, is there enough there that we still have to go by that requirement of reusing the windows that are existing? Amy and I have had this conversation 1,000 times, probably, through the years. We always have this conversation. Usually when somebody calls and says, I want to replace windows, I always say the same thing. We can't. Why? Because of Amy. Who's Amy? Amy Moore. Would you like Amy Moore's number? That's usually the way the conversation goes. And they knew this when they bought the house and everything too, so there's not anything that's hidden here or anything like that. But she wanted me to bring the question to y'all and have a back and forth discussion based on what we've discovered as we've been peeling this back. Probably the one thing that I disagree with a lot of old houses is, with Rachel and Amy, is you can go in and renovate any window. You can go and strip it down. You can do all of the paint peeling. And I don't have a lot of guys that do that anymore, so it's pretty expensive. It's a real specialized market. There's just not 25 people that want to go out there and rehab a window. The last one I did was on Water Reed around the corner from this house, and we figured it cost as much to rehab that window as it would to buy a nice Marvin or Pella or Anderson unit. And we actually ended up, because somebody had, in that particular project, because old units had been used in one area from the 90s that were falling apart, the original ones, so Amy and them let me, and Rachel and them let me rebuild the ones up top and add the new ones down below. And so you just have to be real careful with that, because you want it to, when you get through with spending this amount of money and everything, you want it all to look right. So, so that is, you know, the option that, but it is expensive to rehab these units. And then the one thing that goes over for that is, after you spend all this money to rehab this unit, and it's looking great, then you have two options at that point. If you want any sort of thermal value, you can add a interior storm window, but not many people do. I've yet to have somebody do an interior storm window. Or the guy goes and buys a $50 metal storm window and he slaps it up on the new window that's just been renovated, so you can't see it.
All right, well, unfortunately, I think your time is up at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
It is. The beaver has gone off.
There are many people.
I will open it up to any questions from commissioners.
Well, first of all, Tim, thank you so much for the lesson in architectural construction, because I really appreciated that. No, I really did. And I think that I really appreciate the attempt to uncover the history of this building and how it came to be. What I don't see is a correlation between how it evolved and how it has in any way taken the window in a different direction other than its original historic condition, right? It may have added to it, but it didn't really change the window. So I feel like, it sounds to me like, and I guess it's a question to staff, that even if we were to approve it, the Bailey bill would not allow it, and so thereby there would be no Bailey bill credits available to this client. So the argument about the money being spent may be a deterrent. I don't know, I'm not, certainly not going to, but you did bring up the value of the cost of the windows and that sort of thing. So I don't know that there was a question in there, but I just wanted to express
Good
that.
statement.
And before we go further, Madam Chair, I'm not sure that I heard that Tim was sworn in. Did
No, I wasn't.
He
was, thank you. I missed it. I just wanted to
No,
double
yeah, no,
check that.
I did.
Thank you.
Do you mean we have to start over? That isn't happening. I think, I mean, I'm not feeling like I'm finding any evidence to support why these windows need to be replaced, other than correlating it to other initiatives going on in the building. So I'm struggling with that.
Can you answer
But
that?
I will open it up to other commissioners.
I'm not struggling with it. It's
Okay.
kind of clear to me that, and I appreciate your attempt to to ask and have a conversation, but to me, it's clear that the windows need to stay in their historic form. Despite what you mentioned about the brick molding.
Brick mold, brick mold.
Brick mold, yeah. And certainly the lights around the front door, I mean, absolutely, if you took those out, it would be, I mean, irreplaceable, so. And I think you and the owners understand that, but so that's just my 2 cents.
So can I ask a quick question really quickly? So we've talked about the windows, we've talked about the surround for the door. Are you also looking to replace the door though, as well?
Yes, so the term surround, we're not placing the columns and the pediment. So we're actually talking about the actual door and the side lights and transom.
Okay.
So that's the side lights and the transom are what we were asking. And I didn't get into that yet, but I was just going to ask, and I can do it real quickly.
Can I just ask clarification? Did staff say earlier that that had been replaced before?
The front door itself
Okay.
appears to be replacement.
All right, so, yeah.
So you want to ask your question first? Or you-
No, absolutely, go
Okay.
ahead. Yeah.
So I'm going to come back to the one that's in second. But on the front door, I agree with Rachel about the sizing of the side lights and the transom and the tube and the square. And each one that she mentioned in the report, I went by and looked at them and took photographs of them. So you see the little squares on the top corner, the transom is a piece at the top, and then the side lights on the side. What I questioned in my mind is I couldn't find one that had leaded glass. Every one that they have done that was noted in the report has wooden mullions and wooden patterns. So I thought, well, which came first? Did somebody like this door with leaded glass and said, ooh, I got to go and take out? But you can pop out the side lights and the transom. And was it wood there at one point? Which one came first? The door that we know is not original, or the shape? I agree with her that it is the same shape. What I'm questioning is the leaded glass. I haven't found anything in this age yet where they've used the leaded glass. The other side of that is, as a mom with small kids, the word lead doesn't even need to come up because of the lead-based paint, the lead-based gaming, all of the stuff that's done where you can get up there and pick on it, stuff like that, can be just a potential hazard to the kid. So I'm not questioning the actual shape of the surround. I'm questioning the leaded part. The leaded part then makes me wonder, well, if it was done after the fact, just the leading, because the other 4 or 5 that were listed around town that he did have very similar porticos, have almost the same type divisions of stuff, but they're not leaded. They're all wooden mullions.
Well, maybe this one was just very special, and they went with the leaded.
Maybe they had more
I mean,
money.
unless you have
Yeah.
proof that it wasn't.
Yeah, and that's what I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's original to it or not, but Rachel, I do agree that the door itself is not original. So that's what kind of brought that up for the door. And then hence, her question to me was, well, can I take the unit out and do a door that is in keeping with the style of the home but have more glass in it, so that you don't have the little tiny 4-inch side lights on the sides. And you end up with a glass door that lets more light into the house.
And I would just note that the lead came on the side lights and transom is different than what you see on the door itself. I can't, it seems, the door itself seems like the lead is not, it's not a true leaded glass window.
It's like a cheaper version. I would say.
Yes.
It's the best
Yeah,
way to put it.
whereas the lead came on the side lights and transom is clearly older.
So
So
the
that-
door
that-
was likely replaced to match the lead
I
in the
believe
glass that's
so.
original.
I believe so.
And that could have been that direction. I just can't find one where he, around town, where he's used the lead. He's very consistent about the pattern. He's very consistent about the shaping, but they're all wooden. Every one of them is wooden. So that was my question. And that's why, that's the only thing we just, kind of.
Commissioner Johnson, did that help clarify your question?
I think so. So basically, we're looking at 3 different part requests.
sounds like it.
That way. So I just wanted to make sure, I know there's some opinions on whether the transom and side lights are original, not original, but, or leaded. But I just wanted to make sure that we were talking about 3 different things, because we didn't discuss the door during the presentation, so I wanted to make that clear.
Sure. And I have one other thing. Amy, what if we don't take the Bailey bill?
What if we don't what?
What if we don't go for the Bailey bill? We qualify for the Bailey bill because we're in an overlay district. And so next goes from there, that if you don't, what if we choose not to choose the Bailey bill as a part of this? How does that affect us?
Staff-
I didn't know how to answer
Yep.
that question.
Well, I'm sure we have an answer, so how about staff respond?
Right, so based on staff's evaluation, I related the window changes and the door changes to both the guidelines themselves and the Baileyville standards,
Right.
and found that it met neither one.
Mhm.
I
They-
found
they-
that changing out the windows and the door did not meet either the design guidelines or the Baileyville standards.
Right.
So
Okay. No, I agree that. So, but what if we didn't do?
the design guidelines for the neighborhood would still apply.
Right, you still have to be in compliance with the design guidelines, whether you take the Bailey bill funding or not.
But doesn't that go through a different process? I mean, when you read the guidelines.
You still come to the same committee here.
Oh, no,
for anything
no.
like
But
that.
you go through kind of a different process when you start looking at the guidelines. I mean, the guidelines do allow you to do the replacement. You have to go through a number count and say how many there, do you replace? Is it more than 50% of the value, or more than 50% of the units in the house?
Staff can respond to that.
Yeah, that's listed in the evaluation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so to me, and what I've always understood is you have the Bailey bill. You automatically qualify for the process of going through the Bailey bill because you're in a landmark or overlay district like that. I didn't know how to answer the question of what if you don't go for the Bailey bill?
Then
What
I gather
happens
you
at
have to
that point?
submit whatever materials are required for the design
Then you
guidelines.
go to just the guideline side of the thing versus
Right.
the Bailey bill side of the requirements, correct?
So when you're applying for the Bailey bill, as I have in the evaluation, you look at the design guidelines for the district, if it's in a district, and you look at the standards for the Bailey bill. So both apply to a project. If you're not applying for the Bailey bill, you look at the design guidelines. So it's all in the evaluation. I have listed out the windows and the door, the guidelines that are specific to this project, because there are exterior changes.
Right.
So I have one other thing. We have a permit that says we can replace the windows. We were issued a building permit for that. I think that was done in error, correct?
Yes.
Yes, I was told by the contractor, but our permit says we can replace the windows in the house.
Yes, a certificate of design approval would have to be written to allow for window replacement, and it was not. So,
That's why I'm here.
Can
I want to have a conversation and a dialogue.
Can I ask staff a question, and I'm sorry, I'm just like harping on this, but I just want to make sure that I truly understand. So for purposes of fashioning a motion, should I choose to do so later on? I'm sorry, can you hear me?
I
No.
can't.
Yeah,
Can you-
just get a
can you
little
hear me?
closer.
Yeah.
Better.
Okay, I apologize, I'm not used to masking and using a microphone at the same time. So hypothetically, if I personally believe that the windows don't meet the design guidelines, the transom and the sidelines don't meet the guidelines, but the door could be replaced because it was not original to begin with, could I parcel out those three different things, and could I potentially fashion a vote in that manner to permit them to replace the door, but excluding the other two pieces?
Yes.
Yes, I think, I mentioned those in my recommendation. I think they are all listed there.
She does.
Okay, I was just making sure,
Yeah.
because the recommendations didn't say, it said door surround, but to me, they were, the door and the transom were different, so I was just making sure I understood.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify today, today's conversation that we're having with you is about this specific item. So the question specifically is the Bailey bill request. And so I'm clearing that by commissioners, because I know you've kind of gone down a lot of different avenues, but
I'll try to do
I want to
three.
get, well, we're doing one. We're going to do the one that's here with the three kind of facets to it. So I just want to clarify that.
right. The request is for the exterior changes, being the wholesale replacement of the windows,
Yes,
the replacement of the door and the door surround, and then also applying for the Bailey bill.
okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be defensive, but I'm trying to be here to answer some questions.
Oh, no, definitely. I
And
just
when
want to
you
make
say
sure
the
we know
one,
what we're
well,
answering.
I agree with you on the one, but
Okay.
the one has some subcategories.
Sure,
And so that's what I meant,
okay.
okay? I'm not trying to, I want to have a dialogue about it because it does come up a lot with the projects.
Okay.
It's one of the biggest ones, that's why we have so many conversations about it.
Right, oh, I know. These are hot topics.
And
Yeah,
so,
they are.
I didn't actually realize that we did till the contractor told me that his permit said replacement of windows. Okay, what do we do there? So there are some things, that's why we have a good relationship of going back and forth and communicating and talking and things like that, because we've been doing it for 20 years.
Mhm.
But if something keeps coming up and somebody says, well, we were granted to paint it, and that's never happened before in Columbia, to paint the brick because it's not original facade, then, and since.
But
like
that's
you were
different than the windows. But that, the facade is different than the windows. The
It is,
windows were
But when
original.
you look at the window, then you start, there's a window, there's a surround, there's a jamb, there's a seal, there's a thickness and all that stuff.
And I really appreciate you defending the concept, but I do agree that these are two separate items. It's the Bailey bill is a separate consideration from actually meeting the design guidelines and the way the
Oh, yeah,
design
no,
guidelines.
I agree with all of you.
Yeah.
I agree. I have both of them on the iPad right here. I've read both of them. What I didn't understand and what I didn't realize is what triggers what. And so, and Rachel did put both of them in there, and I've read both of them, guidelines, and in separate section, is it the city ordinance, Rachel? The section? What is it? For
The Bailey bill
historical-
section is in the city ordinance.
Yeah, so it's in the city ordinance, and the guidelines are over here. I understand all that. What I didn't know, and what I was trying to figure out, or been trying to figure out, is does one piggyback off the other, or is one related to the tax credit deductions, which the Bailey bill is related to the tax credit deductions. And what it sounds like to me is that if a person opts not to do the Bailey bill part of it, then they still have to meet the guidelines of the Wells Garden section
Correct.
Correct.
in there like that. I don't know that it says it that clearly from reading them, but that's what I'm interpreting now from what I'm hearing you say.
Okay. Any other questions from commissioners before we move on to any public comments? We good? Okay. We encourage those that would like to communicate via email to begin sending in letters and emails to cocboardmeeting@columbiasc.gov or on the web at publicinput.com/cocddrc-AUG 2021. For those wanting to leave a voicemail or speak live, call 855-925-2801. When prompted, please enter the meeting code 4020. Then press star 2 to begin leaving the voicemail. If you would like to speak live, press star 3. So we'll now hear any comments from anyone here in person. How about any comments received in writing?
You could ask them and see if they would like to speak. They're on
Oh,
Zoom.
do we, well, is
The
this somebody
honors.
on the phone, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, the applicants would need to unmute themselves so that the audio can come through if they'd like to speak. There we go.
Hi, I think Bakari wanted to speak on our behalf.
Okay, if this is the applicant first, can you please state your name?
This is Bakari Sellers. We're just very thankful and grateful for,
And hold on just one
the
second,
opportunity.
sir. Let me just finish. That's good. State your name, and do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
Bakari Sellers, and yes,
Okay, thank you.
I do. No, we want to thank you guys for your time. We want to thank Tim for his presentation today. We would remark that there still are a great deal of inconsistencies, not just for myself, but for other homeowners who may be coming into the neighborhood regarding what is allowed, regarding the coupling or decoupling of the Bailey bill versus the guidelines. That hasn't been clear to us throughout the process, and even after today, it's not clear. So regardless of the ruling one makes on our home, we hope for the future of the neighborhood and people coming before the board that the rules and guidelines become clearer. A home like ours that has gone through so many iterations and changes, for one to say you want to maintain the historical facade on one hand, but not on the next, reeks of inconsistency. But we understand that that's precedent in the way that it's been going. We just hope going forward, as we put a great deal of value into this home, this is our forever home, that for individuals coming before the board next time, maybe not for us, maybe we do a better job of educating constituents about the process. We add clarity and consistency in the process. And we just make sure it's pleasant. I can't say that it has been the most pleasant process, but we just want to say thank you, Tim. You've done an outstanding job. We respect the committee and your decision, and we look forward to it. We look forward to being productive and tax-paying good citizens of the Wells Garden area.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for the applicant on the phone? Okay.
So I'm just curious, since it appears that there was some confusion leading up to this presentation today, I mean, is there anything that we need to defer to consider before making a final ruling? Because I don't want to render a decision if the applicants don't feel as though that they've had a chance to fully suss out the rules and the guidelines. So I'm just curious if that would be something that we would consider in this instance, so that you can go back.
No, to be clear, we're fine.
You're good? Okay.
I mean, it's not for us. I mean, we can remark about the process at a later date, hopefully becoming more pleasant and efficient. But we feel as if our cards have been played as perfectly as they can by Tim. The board is ready to make a decision. I know you guys have been busy today, but just for the sake of going forward, consistency, it matters in processes like this. And I can say that this process has been decently, and the rules that applied have been decently and consistent. And so we're just hopeful going forward that we clarify that for others. Thank you.
Any other comments received? No? Any other comments in closing?
No, I think Bakari summed it up. And like I said, I think the inconsistency part, again, for me, who's been working with something for 25 years, how long have we had I think we had 2008 was when we enacted for the Wells Garden. And I still couldn't figure out what governs, what path, what dictates what. Is it the Bailey bill that direction, or is it the Wells Garden that direction? And then what if somebody doesn't take the Bailey bill, go that opportunity, then what happens at that point? So that was kind of that I could not answer. Even having worked with it for years, I wasn't sure what was the clear path for that part. Does that make sense?
No, I understand your point. Yeah. All right. Unless there's any follow-up comments, I'll open the floor to a motion.
Okay, so I would like to do this like a little differently than what was recommended, so.
Commissioner Johnson, just try to get a little closer. to
Oh,
the
can you
microphone.
all hear me?
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to vote. I think there's certain aspects of this that should be granted and maybe other aspects that don't fit within the guidelines and in that spirit or vein. I move to grant in part the certificate of design approval at 1808 Catawba Street, subject to the following conditions. The front door can be replaced, subject to the selection being reviewed by staff. However, I move to deny the request for the wholesale replacement of the windows and the surround around the door. And this takes into consideration Section 7 of the design guidelines, the testimony provided, and the exhibits that were also provided today. I'm sorry, could y'all hear that last part?
What was the last, I can hear the last.
And I was just saying that my motion takes into consideration the design guidelines outlined, as well as the testimony, the comments, and the exhibits provided today.
Did staff clearly capture the essence there? Okay.
What about the windows?
Well, clearly, give the summary again of the motion,
Okay.
Commissioner Johnson.
So-
I got it, but I'll let you do it. Yeah.
Okay, so I move to grant in part the certificate of design approval at 1808 Catawba Street, subject to the following conditions. The first condition being that the front door can be replaced with the selection to be reviewed by staff prior to purchase. However, I move to deny the request for the wholesale replacement of the windows and surround, and that's based upon the design guidelines of Section 7. And that would also include a denial of the surround and changing that out.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Ms. Branham?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller-Wilt?
Yes.
Ms. Jaco?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
No.
Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did
One
you-
thing. Amy, can we have two design approval for one project? Because we already have a design approval on, so you can have two?
Did y'all want to do the Bailey bill still? Because she didn't make a motion on
No,
the
no,
Bailey bill.
again, I'm just, again, I've been doing this a long time.
No, I'm
So-
asking,
so we
I'm
have a-
asking,
We had a design approval for the project from August.
Mm-hmm.
This was for the Bailey bill.
no.
Yeah, I think what Rachel's saying is the motion that was just said was not
Not for
saying
the
to
Bailey
passing it for the Bailey bill.
Right.
It was what?
The motion that we just passed did not also include it getting preliminary approval for the Bailey bill.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out. So we have a design approval from August. We came back for the Bailey bill approval for this time, right? And then, so my question to Amy was, can we, one, have two design approvals for the project? Or one, right? And then two, based on what Ms. Johnson said, which is fine, not doing the surrounds, but replacing the front door, not replacing the windows, correct?
Correct.
And then, does that stop at that point, and we'll have another motion for the
It should.
Bailey bill?
I think that's what staff is recommending.
Yeah,
That's the part I'm trying to figure out.
That's right.
Okay.
So you tell us what are we still missing? We need a motion now on,
so yes, you would need a separate motion to approve the Bailey bill.
okay. With the same caveats that were just pretty much stated in the first motion.
Right, yeah,
Yes,
as
okay.
I listed it out in the staff
Yes.
recommendation.
Yeah, you got to lead the horse to water here. All right. We need a motion in regards to the Bailey bill component.
I'm happy to make the
All
motion
right, thank you.
for granting preliminary certification for the Bailey bill with the following conditions, that the door may be replaced with staff approval. However, the windows, original windows throughout the rest of the house, as well as the surround around the door, will remain intact and not be removed. but just replaced, renovated.
Am I allowed to add one thing to Mary Beth? The original one is that can be seen from the street.
Okay,
I don't think that was the request, was it?
yeah.
That's what we talked about. Rachel.
DDRC and staff only have purview over what can be seen from the street, so it doesn't need to be specified.
I got
I was
you.
gonna
I just
say,
wanted
wait a
to
minute, yeah,
clarify-
it's like
I
that.
just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
what you said.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I deviated a little bit from the statement, and
Yes.
I probably never should deviate. We're all learning lots of new things.
Me too.
And can you just add at the end of your motion, all details defer to staff?
And yes, refer all the rest of the details to staff.
All right, may I have a second?
I think we need to mention the fourth and fifth bullets as well.
Oh, you're right, yeah, if you don't mind, Mayor.
I'm sorry?
Commissioner Simpson,
What?
just read the third and the fourth bullet as well, too, into the motion, just for clarity.
That all work meeting the standards of the work as outlined in section 17-698, and all details were deferred to staff.
In the one right above that, the one right in the middle.
The project meeting or exceeding the 20% investment threshold requirements for qualified rehabilitation expenses.
All right, thank you, sorry, okay. Second,
Second.
move for a vote.
Mr. Broom,
Yes.
Ms. Branham,
Yes.
Ms. Fuller-Wilt,
Yes.
Ms. Jaco,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Wolf,
No.
and Mr. Baker.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. Okay, is there any other business this evening?
The only other business we have is that Ms. Fuller-Wilt is rotating off the commission, so this is her last meeting. And just wanted to thank her for her service and wish her well.
Definitely. Well, you will be missed. Any other items? How about the continuing education? Are we doing,
I think
we on
I think we're all good on that.
Okay.
Sky? Thumbs up.
thumbs up? All right, that's good. All right, if there's no other business, can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right,
Second.
okay, all right, thank you. Adjourned.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna do this
everyone.
just for fun, yes.